gunning it. You guys probably remember my Cadillac Escalade V video I did on this channel a few weeks back. When I did that video, I mentioned what I like to call a berserker moment in the automotive industry. Basically what that means is that before transitioning towards fully electric vehicles, car makers are going to come out with some pretty extreme gasoline cars, especially the American car makers. Basically, they're going to shove a V8 in anything they can, in any way possible, and they'll jack up the price, and those cars will sell like hotcakes. And here's another one. It's called the Jeep Wrangler Rubicon 392. It's basically a Jeep Wrangler with a 6.4 liter HEMI V8 underneath the hood. Completely ridiculous. Nobody needed a vehicle like this one, and nobody asked for this. Actually, some people probably asked for this. I know I once asked Jeep to put a V8 underneath the hood of the Wrangler, but nevertheless, this is yet another extremely powerful vehicle that has no reason to exist. Just like the Escalade V, this is a vehicle that has way too much power for the way it was designed. It's really expensive to run, it's hard on gas, it's very powerful and super loud. So come with me, we're gonna go for a drive and we're gonna explore, well, all the neat features on the Jeep Rubicon 392. Aesthetically speaking, there isn't much on the Wrangler 392 that allows it to distinguish itself from a regular Wrangler, but there are some details, and once you spot them, well, you can't really unsee them. It all begins with the 392 logo right here on the hood. You've got the massive air intake on the top of the hood. That's very Hellcat-ish. You're gonna get some gold accents here and there, like the gold tow hooks right here on the front. And the track is a bit wider, so as you can see, this is the widest Jeep Wrangler ever built. It's based on the Rubicon, which is already a serious off-road machine, and it's even more wild in this form. So, interesting fact, when Jeep released the Wrangler 392 online about a year ago, I was in the presentation, and I, along with other journalists, asked a very important question to Jeep. How did you fortify a Wrangler to be able to withstand 470 horsepower and 470 foot-pounds of torque? Because that's how much power this thing makes. That's about 200 horsepower more than a standard Wrangler with the 3.6 liter V6. And the answer was quite funny because they didn't tell us much. They basically said that they fiddled with the suspension a bit, they modified the sway bars, they changed the rear differential, and that's about it. Now the 392 is based on the Rubicon, which is the most extreme off-road version for the Wrangler. So it already has the lifted suspension, it has the off-road tires, it's got the lockable differentials. I can disengage the sway bars. And then basically what they did is that they fiddled a bit with the tuning to make it a bit more stable at high speeds, and they shoved the 6.4 liter V8 taken directly out of the Charger and the Challenger. They call it the 392. It's a reference to the old 392 cubic inch V8 engines, because this new one, the 6.4 liter, has about the same displacement. So there's nothing in here that really allows me to know that I'm driving the most powerful Jeep Wrangler ever built, except for a sportier steering wheel. However, I have a tiny button here that allows me to turn on the exhaust, because this thing can go from loud to louder. And then when you gun it, Jesus Christ, this thing is ridiculous. Okay, I think I just splashed my camera crew. Now this engine is mated to the same 8-speed ZF transmission as in the regular Wrangler, and honestly, that's pretty much all you need. Now another interesting fact is that this thing is limited to 177 kilometers an hour. Don't ask me how I know this, but it's the case. I like, however, when you turn the exhaust off, the Wrangler 392 is actually quite civilized. I mean, what's interesting about the way that Jeep has engineered the exhaust system on this thing, and by the way, if you look in the rear, you're going to notice that the exhaust system looks rather normal. There's really not much on this car that allows it to look like it has almost 500 horsepower. When it's in quiet mode, this thing really only starts screaming at around 3,000 RPM. So trotting around town with the 392 feels like just another Wrangler. It's also quite amusing to see how this thing handles. When you're gunning it, when you're flooring the throttle, all, you are hanging on for dear life because the Wrangler doesn't have a front end. What I mean by that is that it doesn't have an independent front suspension, just like the Ford Bronco, for instance. This is a live axle setup in the front. This is what allows the Wrangler to be a very capable machine in off-roading. And honestly, I still think that the Wrangler is probably the most capable off-road machine on the market. I drove one during the Rubicon Trail, and it's absolutely impressive what these machines can do. But then when you're stuffing 470 horsepower under the hood with a massive V8 engine, you're modifying the power-to-weight characteristics. You're also modifying the weight distribution. And that's when things become kind of scary. Now, driving the Wrangler at a very high speed, and I'm not going to do that right now because I don't want to break the speed limit, but is not particularly exciting because it is quite scary. You feel like the front end is super light. All the power is on the rear. Gunning it. It's so loud. It's so loud. It's so obnoxious. It's just ridiculous. And what's also quite funny is that nobody will really understand where the noise came from because you turn around and you hear this kind of noise. You're thinking, oh, it's another douchebag in a Challenger or Charger. Then you're seeing a Wrangler. And it looks just like any other Wrangler, except with more air intakes and more green and more gold on it. There's always something pleasant about driving a good old V8 engine. V8s are fun because they have a lot of low-end torque. They're very smooth as well. And you have this feeling of power, this feeling of strength that you're not going to get from a V6 or a turbocharged four-cylinder. Now, obviously, one could argue that if this thing would be electric, it would be just as, if not more powerful. It would take off quicker off the line. It would probably have a better weight distribution. But that's not the point. The reason why the 392 exists is precisely because we do not need this car. This was created. This is another engineer wet dream. Now, this ZF transmission does a fantastic job with the power delivery. I mean, you can leave it in automatic mode. It's going to be fine. But I like to put it in manual mode. What I like about this transmission, yes, you've got the paddle shifters, but in the Wrangler, I find it's actually more pleasant to use a manual transmission like this. Just pull the shifter here on the left, put it in M mode for manual, and then you just can cycle through the gears yourself. That allows you to drive in a calm neighborhood like this one. You don't need to go very fast, and you can just make a lot of noise. Second gear here. God, this is loud. This is so loud and so mean. Oh my God, I love this truck. And driving a Rubicon also means that you can drive over speed bumps very fast like this, and it'll just take it in. You feel it though, you really feel speed bumps in a Wrangler. It's not the most refined ride. So perhaps where this thing would make more sense is out there, like in the wild, in the sand dunes, in the mud. But I'm not going to go off-roading because, well, the last time I tried off-roading with the Jeep Wrangler, things didn't go very well. Now, I did do the Rubicon Trail with Jeep. They gave me a few tricks, and okay, no, this is not working. I really thought I could make it. And there's also the fact that this thing is very expensive. The one I'm driving stickers for $101,000. So this is basically a $100,000 Jeep. Feels like some kind of a joke from Jeep. It's like, hey, here we are with this old Jeep Wrangler. It's old technology. It's basically built like an ox cart, and we're going to shove an old V8 engine that's been on the market for over 10 years. This thing won't cost us anything to build, and we're going to sell it at a ridiculous price, and people will buy it. And that's exactly what's happening with the Wrangler 392. I mean, orders are filled up, people are lining up in dealerships, and some dealers are selling them well over markup price because they know that in a few years, this kind of vehicle will just be impossible. So here you have it, a $100,000 Jeep with nearly 500 horsepower. I like this thing a lot. Who wouldn't? I mean, the moment you gun the throttle, you really feel like everything's gonna break apart and then you're gonna just end up in the ditch. But it also adds character. This is what makes the Wrangler 392 a really unique beast. Now, this is obviously gonna become a future classic. There aren't that many produced. There won't be that many on the road. And in a few years, this kind of vehicle will no longer be possible because Jeep, like everybody else, will be transitioning to fully electric propulsion. So on that note, I'm gonna go take this thing in a trail, and this time I'll try not to get stuck. I mean, I thought Jeeps could go anywhere.